In autumn 1227, while on campaign against the Tangut Kingdom, Mongol Emperor Chinggis Khan died around 65 years of age. Kept secret from his own army, the truth of what killed the great Khan was known to only his inner circle, and perhaps not even they knew what ended him. Yet, that did not stop writers across Asia from trying to explain his death. And in this video, we will present the theories and rumors which surrounded the final days of the world conqueror. First, we'll note the most widely accepted version. Our closest source to his death is likely the secret history of the Mongols. A chronicle written for the Mongolian royal family perhaps started in the year following Chinggis's death. While campaigning against the Tangut Kingdom, Chinggis fell from his horse in winter 1225-1226, injured so badly that his commanders wanted to withdraw. But Chinggis refused them and continued on the campaign despite severe fever. He led his forces for another year and a half, finally in summer 1227 entering the Liupan Mountains to seek respite, but continued to decline and was unable to meet the Tangut King on his submission, by then too ill or too dead. The secret history does not provide a day for his death, simply stating that he ascended into heaven. As said above, secrecy was maintained. If revealed he died before victory was totally achieved, it might be feared that heaven had removed its support and encouraged renewed Tangut resistance. This need for secrecy is what kept the remainder of our sources from fully understanding what occurred. A fall from a horse can severely damage a human body, breaking bones which could have difficulty healing due to the rigors of campaign and Chinggis's advancing age, causing infection and the slow death he seems to have suffered. Part of why this theory is so accepted is because it's a perfectly logical, though unheroic, explanation. Even today, there are versions of this death in Mongol legend, such as his horse tripping on a marmot hole and throwing him to similar results. But, as said by Frank McLynn in his own biography of Chinggis, human nature requires that the demise of a great man can never come about for any normal or banal reason. And from there we get on to more exciting suggestions. Most of our 13th century accounts are vague. Important sources like the Shengyu, Qinzhen Liu say nothing on the matter. The Persian writers Juvayni, Rashid al-Din, and the Ming era Yuan Shi speak of illness aggravated by the climate while emphasizing Chinggis's orders to keep the death a secret. Part of the army had suffered from typhus or dysentery earlier that year while besieging a Tangut city, which some modern authors connect to Chinggis's death. But this is unlikely considering the timing and the Han's own whereabouts over the campaign. The farther we go across Asia in time and space over the century, the more our accounts vary. For instance, the Franciscan friar John de Plano Carpini thought Chinggis was killed by lightning. Marco Polo repeats that Chinggis died of infection from a Tangut arrow in the knee. Chinggis was struck by an arrow in the leg, but in 1212 while on campaign against the Jin dynasty. Bar Hebraeus suggested malaria, but this is impossible to prove and unlikely. The Persian writer Juzjani, a refugee from the Mongol conquest of Khwarezm, living in the Delhi Sultanate, wrote around 1260 a particularly insane account. In his version, Chinggis was defeated by the Tangut King in battle multiple times, before the Tangut King allied with Chinggis against the Jin. But Chinggis's commanders worried about the Tangut King betraying them, so they decided to kill him first. For this betrayal, the Tangut King warned Chinggis, "If he is killed, white blood will come out of him, and 3 days later Chinggis will die." Chinggis, rather understandably, thought this was nonsense, and ordered the Tangut King killed. But, lo and behold, when the executioner struck his neck, white blood came forth, and when Chinggis saw this, he fell ill. 3 days later his heart failed and he went straight to hell, though not before ordering the Tangut to be exterminated. The 13th century authors had difficulty explaining his death. Most repeated baseless rumors or just made things up. Considering the secrecy around his death, they had little choice. Accompanying these interpretations is discrepancies on who was present when Chinggis died, if at this point he nominated Orgudai to be his successor, and the actual date, being given on various days over August 1227. That it occurred in later August, usually just before the destruction of the Tangut, is one of the few things our sources do agree upon. Based off the most detailed accounts, Paul Pelliot argued convincingly that Chinggis died somewhere in the Liupan Mountains, and few modern authors dispute that. Even today, there are local legends that Chinggis died in that area. For more surviving Mongolian language sources, we have to jump to the 16th and 17th centuries. After the fall of the Mongol Empire, the domination of Mongolia by the Oirats, the conversion of the Mongols to Buddhism, and the Manchu conquest. Around then, a much more graphic version of Chinggis' death was spread. In these accounts, after the defeat of the Tangut, Chinggis takes either the wife or the daughter of the Tangut king as a concubine. This princess, named Göbeltian, was described as extraordinarily beautiful, but hated Chinggis for the destruction of her people. She smuggled a knife into the tent and killed or critically injured him after he fell asleep, before flinging herself into the Yellow River. In the most famous variation, which I will try to describe as professionally as possible, she hides the knife in her sexual organ, which critically injures Chinggis Khan's own sexual organ during intercourse. This is terrible. Logistically, it's unlikely and sounds like the kind of humiliating slander non-Chinggisid parties would spread. Indeed, many Mongols see this story as lies created by the non-Chinggisid Oirats in the 17th century. While it would explain why their 13th century ancestors were so secretive, there is no contemporary information supporting a Göbeltian, and judging by the illness described in the sources, it doesn't seem Chinggis would have been physically up to any, rumpy-pumpy. Anyways. Now, a quick mention of his burial and tomb. Frankly, I don't think there is a huge amount to discuss here. The general theme among the 13th and 14th century sources is that Chinggis was brought back to Mongolia and buried in a hidden tomb, generally taken to be on Mount Burhan Khaldun, the sacred mountain near Chinggis' birthplace he used to hide from his enemies and confer with eternal blue heaven. We know quite a number of the other great Khans were buried there as well, though none of their tombs have ever been found. There are a few remarks to make. Firstly, the Mongols did not embalm their dead. A corpse in the heat of late August, early September is not going to last the 1,000 kilometers from the Liupan Shan over the Gobi Desert to northeastern Mongolia. There are persistent rumors that Chinggis Khan was buried somewhere in the Ordos, where the mausoleum of Chinggis Khan stands today in Izyan Horobanner. The aforementioned 16th, 17th century Mongol sources contain a legend that the funeral carriage was bogged down in the mud before a Muna mountain in the Ordos. That carriage does make it to Mongolia, but the Erdenin Tubshi implies his body was not in the coffin. This could refer to the coffin being empty, but note what we said earlier about the Mongols not embalming their dead. Bat-Udjabuld noted that the tribes left to guard the shrine of Chinggis alleged they were guarding ashes, bone, and the hair of the Khan, while his clothing and effects were carried on to Burhan Khaldun. Perhaps, in the face of the Khan's rapidly decomposing body in the heat of late August 1227, he was cremated to facilitate transportation back to his homeland, and thus there was no body to be removed from the coffin. It's unlikely he was buried in the Ordos, being as that tradition doesn't appear in sources until considerably after the fact. It was only a newly conquered territory in 1227, and not really even inhabited by Mongols until the 15th century. The mobile shrine of Chinggis, the Eight White Gairs, is hard to confirm as even being in the Ordos before the 17th century, coming there more so due to the shifting power centers of the Mongol princes of the period. Powerful southwestern Mongols, needing to be invested but unable to make the trip to the far north of Burhan Khaldun, needed something closer to legitimize themselves. The emerging Qing dynasty favored Mongol princes in that region. Perhaps they desired the shrine of Chinggis Khan to be an area closer to control than northern Mongolia. I don't think there is a tomb of Chinggis Khan that will ever be found. It's unlikely he was buried with much beyond bows, clothing, and horses, Immediate things he would need in the spirit world. Tombs with vast halls of treasure like an Egyptian pharaoh are not found in Mongolia. If Chingis was cremated, this would only reinforce the difficulty in finding a body. There are also traditions around the journey back to Mongolia, that all bystanders were killed, and various stories about how the grave was hidden, such as diverting a river over top of it. But all of these are later additions, and I think are nothing but stories. Often details were added from the burials of later Hans and the Yuan emperors, which we know more about, but were influenced by customs of the sedentary world. On top of all of that, finding and digging up his grave would not be something the Mongols today would idly watch. Burhan Khaldun and the surrounding area are a sacred, protected site. Most expeditions to the area have been forced to be non-intrusive for that reason. Out of respect for Mongolians today, I think the grave should stay the way it has for the last 8 centuries. The gravesite was always intended to be hidden, and was immediately successful. Like so much else about Chingis, the tomb remains and will stay a secret. And if you're the sort of person to believe in vengeful spirits, I'm pretty sure that spirit of a man called the World Conqueror is not one you want to anger via exhumation.